Alpha King hides behind a crippled mask before Omega as a single gesture unmasks his real power. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Ethan Thornridge, the Alpha King, had ruled over the Northern Territories with an iron fist for years. His strength was unrivaled, his power feared by all who crossed his path. But behind the majestic throne and the mighty title, Ethan hid a secret, a curse that bound him to a form that was far from his true self. To the world, he appeared crippled, weakened by an old wound that left him limping with the use of a cane. The once powerful Alpha King was reduced to playing the part of a frail, helpless man. And yet, no one knew the truth. No one knew the true strength that lay beneath the mask of weakness. But there was one person who might, one person who could see through the facade, Lily Dawson. She was an Omega, rejected by her pack, mocked by the world for her perceived weakness. But Lily was no ordinary Omega. She was strong in ways no one could understand, with a quiet resilience that burned brighter than anyone realized. She had been discarded, left to fend for herself in a harsh world that only valued strength. Her pack had abandoned her, her heart broken by rejection. Yet, through it all, she had managed to hold her head high, refusing to let the world crush her spirit. It was in this state of vulnerability, when she felt most lost, that their paths crossed. Ethan, in his crippled form, had been sent to observe the Omega, to see if she was worthy of his attention. He was told she was weak, a mere shadow of the others. But as he watched her from the shadows, he saw something different. Lily was a woman who carried strength in her soul, strength that no one had bothered to see before. As the days passed, Ethan grew more intrigued. He observed her actions, how she moved through the world with quiet grace despite the hardships she faced. Lily's heart was pure, and in her, he saw a spark that could light a fire. But Ethan couldn't reveal himself. Not yet. Not until she proved herself. He needed to know if she could see through the mask, if she could recognize the power that he held deep within. So, he continued to play the part of the broken Alpha King, hiding behind the crippled mask. But everything was about to change. One simple gesture from Lily would unmask him, and when it happened, the world would never be the same. As the days passed, Ethan continued to observe Lily from a distance, carefully watching how she navigated through a world that had cast her aside. He had seen many Omegas, but none like her. She did not cower or shrink in the face of mockery or rejection. Instead, she walked with a quiet strength, one that seemed to grow with every cruel word spoken against her. It was as if the weight of the world only fueled her determination to survive. She had an aura about her that made Ethan question everything he had ever known about power. Omega or not, she carried a resilience that made even the strongest wolves take notice. Yet, she was unaware of the presence that lingered behind her. Ethan kept his distance, never revealing the truth of who he was. His disguise as a crippled, weak man had been carefully crafted. He could not afford for her to see through him. Not yet. One evening, as the sun began to set and the forest around the kingdom grew quiet, Lily found herself wandering through the woods just beyond the royal gates. She had always found solace in the woods, where she could be alone with her thoughts. The world here felt less cruel, the trees and the earth offering her comfort. As she walked deeper into the forest, a strange sense of being watched crept over her. She stopped for a moment, looking around, but saw nothing. Shrugging it off as her imagination, she continued walking. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan had been following her, carefully keeping to the shadows. The moment she stopped, he froze, not wanting to reveal himself. There was something about Lily, something that drew him in. A quiet magnetism that made him feel alive again. It had been years since anyone had made him feel anything other than duty and power. But Lily, with her quiet strength, had changed that. As she continued down the path, a sudden rustling in the bushes startled her. She stepped back, instinctively reaching for the small dagger she kept at her side for protection. The sound grew louder, and before she could react, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was a large wolf, injured and clearly in distress. The animal limped toward her, its eyes filled with pain. Lily hesitated for a moment, but her compassion took over. She stepped forward slowly, crouching down to the wolf's level. "Easy there," she whispered softly, her hand extended cautiously. The wolf whimpered, allowing her to get close enough to inspect its injuries. It was clear the creature had been attacked. She moved gently, avoiding any further harm to the animal, and began to tend to its wounds as best as she could. Ethan watched from the shadows, a strange sense of admiration filling him. He had never seen anyone care for another being the way Lily did. Her touch was tender, her heart open to the suffering of others. It was a quality that Ethan himself had once possessed, but had long since buried beneath the weight of his responsibilities. He stepped forward, revealing himself for the first time. "You're brave," he said softly, his voice raspy from years of disuse. Lily looked up in surprise, her eyes widening when she saw the man standing before her. He was tall, dressed in simple clothing that made him look like just another traveler. His eyes were intense, silver gray like the moonlight. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice wary but not afraid. Ethan hesitated for a moment before replying. "Someone who has been watching you," he said quietly. "You're not like the others. You see things differently." Lily stood up slowly, eyeing him cautiously. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You care for things that others would discard. That makes you different." Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she took a step back. Something about this man seemed familiar, yet she couldn't place it. "Why are you following me?" she asked, her voice firmer now. Ethan paused. He had to be careful. He couldn't reveal himself to her just yet. "I'm not following you," he said. "I just wanted to see how you would react." Lily frowned, not understanding. She was about to speak again when the wolf let out a low whine, drawing her attention back to it. She knelt beside the animal, continuing to tend to its wounds. Ethan watched her for a moment, captivated by her kindness. This woman, this Omega, was unlike any other. And she had no idea that the man before her was the Alpha King, the ruler of all she had ever known. The tension in the air was thick, the forest around them still and silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Lily continued to tend to the wounded wolf, her hands gentle as she cleaned the gash along its side. Ethan stood at a distance, watching her with an intensity that sent a strange shiver down her spine. There was something about him, something familiar in his gaze, but she couldn't quite place it. She had seen that kind of quiet strength before, though she had no idea where. "You're good with animals," Ethan remarked, his voice soft but carrying a weight of something deeper, something hidden. Lily looked up at him, her brow furrowed. "Thank you," she said, though she wasn't sure if he was complimenting her or simply stating an obvious truth. "I've always felt more at peace in the forest than anywhere else." Ethan nodded, stepping closer, though he made sure to keep his distance. "It's rare to find someone who isn't afraid of the wild," he said quietly. Lily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she focused on the wolf, brushing its fur as it started to relax under her touch. She felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest, a connection to the animal that was deeper than just sympathy. As the wolf settled, she stood, wiping her hands on the cloth she had brought with her. "I should get you back to the village," she said, glancing up at Ethan. "They'll be worried about you." Ethan's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his silver-gray eyes. "I'm not who you think I am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily froze. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. She hadn't been trusting of many people in her life, and the air around Ethan felt charged with a strange tension. He hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether to continue. Finally, he took a step forward, lowering his cane and standing a little straighter. "I'm not crippled," he admitted, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of the truth. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had seen him limp, had watched him lean on his cane as if he couldn't stand on his own 2 feet, yet here he was, revealing the truth that shook her understanding of everything she had seen. Ethan looked into her eyes, his gaze steady, almost pleading for her to understand. "I'm not who I've led you to believe," he repeated. Lily took a step back, her heart racing. "Who are you, then?" she demanded, her hands trembling at her sides. The forest seemed to close in around them, the night air growing colder as a storm of thoughts whirled in her mind. Ethan took another step closer, his body radiating an undeniable power that had been hidden beneath his facade of weakness. "I am Ethan Thornridge, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories," he said softly. The words hung in the air, heavy with the gravity of their meaning. Lily stared at him, her mind racing to catch up with what he had just said. Ethan Thornridge. The Alpha King. She had heard stories, of course, of the ruthless ruler who had united the packs under his iron fist. But she had never imagined she would meet him, let alone help him in his time of need. But, why? Lily's voice faltered, the shock of the revelation still sinking in. Why disguise yourself? Ethan's expression softened, and for a moment, the harshness of his role as Alpha King seemed to disappear, replaced by something more vulnerable. "I needed to see if you could see me for who I truly am, not for the title I carry or the power I hold," he explained. "I needed to know if you would see past the mask and understand who I am beneath it." Lily stood frozen, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had been helping the most powerful man in the land, and he had never once revealed his true identity. Yet, in a strange way, the truth didn't change anything. The kindness he had shown her, the way he had observed her without judgment, was real. "You were testing me?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion and disbelief. "Not just you," he replied quietly. "I was testing myself. I wanted to know if I could trust someone again. Someone who wouldn't see me as a king, but as a person." The silence between them stretched on, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Lily felt the weight of his words settle in her chest, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of understanding between them. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing: her life had just changed forever. "I can see the confusion in your eyes," Ethan said quietly, his voice low and soothing, yet filled with an undeniable weight of responsibility. He took a careful step closer, his posture no longer that of a crippled man, but of the Alpha King, powerful and commanding. Lily stood frozen in place, her mind racing, still trying to come to terms with the revelation that the man standing before her was none other than the Alpha King, the ruler of the Northern Territories. "I never wanted to deceive you," he continued, his voice softer now. "But I had to know if you could see me for who I really am, not the title I hold." Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. She had been helping the most feared man in the land, and yet, his vulnerability had never seemed more real than in this moment. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why go to such lengths to hide who you are?" Ethan's eyes darkened with a complexity that only someone who had lived through the weight of the world could carry. "Because the world sees me as a symbol," he said, his gaze distant as if looking beyond her, beyond the forest, beyond everything. "A symbol of power, of strength. But I am more than that. I am human, with fears and doubts, just like anyone else. And for once, I wanted to experience life without being defined by the crown on my head." His words hung in the air, heavy with the burden of his confession. Lily remained silent, unsure of how to respond. She had never imagined the Alpha King, the man who commanded armies, who ruled with such authority, could feel so fragile. It was hard to reconcile the image of the king with the man standing before her now. Ethan, sensing her hesitation, took a deep breath, stepping back slightly. "I understand if you need time to process this," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability he had just revealed. "I've lived a life where I couldn't show weakness. But with you, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that there's more to life than power." Lily's mind was in turmoil. She had never expected to meet the Alpha King, let alone stand before him as a person, as a man with emotions and fears. But something in her gut told her that there was more to him than the stories she had heard, more than the cold, ruthless king who ruled over the packs. The warmth in his voice, the way he looked at her as if he saw something in her, was not what she expected from someone of his stature. "What do you want from me?" she finally asked, her voice steady now, though her heart still raced. Ethan met her gaze, his eyes softening. Nothing more than your understanding, he said simply. I just needed to know if you could see beyond the mask. I needed to know if I could trust you. The weight of his words sank in. Trust. It was something Lily had rarely given to others, but in this moment, she felt something stir within her. Something that told her this was not just a test of strength or power, but a test of something deeper, of connection. You can trust me, she said quietly, her voice firm now. I don't know what this means, but I'm not afraid of who you are. You're not just the Alpha King. You're a man. And I see you. Ethan's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw the man beneath the crown, the man who was just as human as anyone else. A flicker of gratitude passed between them, a silent understanding that would change the course of both their lives. He smiled, though it was small and tentative, as if unsure how to react to the warmth she had just given him. Thank you, Lily, he said, his voice filled with a quiet sincerity that was rare for him. You've given me something I didn't think I would find again. Lily nodded, her own heart unexpectedly touched by the weight of his words. The forest around them seemed to grow still, as if even nature itself was holding its breath. There, in the shadows of the trees, amidst the secrets and the truths that had been revealed, a connection was born, a connection that would bind their fates together, whether they were ready for it or not. I think we should go back, Lily said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. The words hung between them, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Ethan's gaze never wavered from her, but there was something in his eyes, something that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something she didn't fully understand. Something she wasn't sure she was ready for. Ethan took a step closer, his eyes filled with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. Lily, he began, his voice low but firm, you don't have to be afraid of what's happening here. Lily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. I'm not afraid, she said quickly, though the words felt foreign coming out of her mouth. She was afraid, more than she had ever been in her life. Not of Ethan, but of what this connection between them could mean. What would it mean for her, a rejected Omega, to be so deeply entangled with the most powerful man in the land? She had always been the one left behind, the one who had to fight for everything, but now, for the first time, she felt like she was standing at the precipice of something huge, something life-changing. Then what is it? Ethan asked, his voice softer now, his presence less imposing. Lily took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. I've never been someone who was chosen, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I've always been the one who was left behind. Cast aside. I don't know what it's like to be someone's first choice. Ethan reached out, his hand brushing gently against hers. You are mine, Lily, he said, his words clear and strong. I chose you the moment I saw you. Not because of who you are to anyone else, but because of who you are to me. I don't care about your past or your rank. I care about you. I want you to know that. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at him, her heart thudding in her chest. She had always believed that her worth was tied to her position, to her status, to how others saw her. But now, standing in front of Ethan, she realized that maybe, just maybe, her worth was something she had always carried within her. But why, she asked, her voice shaky. Why me? Ethan looked at her, his gaze softening. Because you're the only one who sees me for who I truly am. Not as the king, not as the alpha, but as a man who needs someone by his side. You make me feel human, in a way I haven't felt in years. Lily swallowed hard, her mind spinning. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Ethan smiled gently, his hand now firmly holding hers. You don't have to say anything, he said, his voice warm and reassuring. Just be with me. That's all I need. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The forest around them seemed to fade away, the only thing left in the world was the silent understanding between them. Lily wasn't sure what this would mean for her future. She wasn't sure if she was ready to take this leap. But in that moment, as she stood there with Ethan, she felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that, for once, she could be part of something greater than herself. Hope that, despite everything she had been through, she could find her place by his side. Slowly, she nodded. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay. Ethan's face lit up with a smile, the kind of smile that made Lily's heart flutter in a way she hadn't expected. Thank you, he whispered. His voice was so sincere, so full of gratitude, that Lily felt her heart swell. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she was willing to face it. With him. Together. I never thought I'd be standing here, with you, Lily whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the forest. Ethan's hand remained gently resting on hers, grounding her in this moment that felt both surreal and real all at once. They had returned to the castle after their quiet moment in the woods, the weight of their unspoken words lingering between them. The grand walls of the royal palace loomed ahead, their imposing structure a stark contrast to the vulnerability they had shared just moments before. Lily had always felt like an outsider in places like this, a mere speck in a world of grandeur. But now, with Ethan by her side, she felt different. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she belonged. Ethan looked at her with a quiet intensity, his silver-gray eyes filled with a warmth she had never expected to see from the Alpha King. You belong here, Lily, he said softly, as though reading her thoughts. This is your home, just as much as it is mine. She met his gaze, her heart skipping a beat. The sincerity in his voice took her by surprise. She had never imagined that someone like him, a man who commanded such power and respect, could see her as an equal. But in this moment, standing beside him, she felt seen. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the Omega who had been cast aside. She felt like a person, valued for who she was. As they made their way through the grand halls of the palace, the murmurs of the court faded into the background. Lily couldn't help but notice the way Ethan moved through the space, confident, composed, the ruler of this entire land. Yet, despite the weight of the crown on his head, there was a softness to him when he was with her, a gentleness that made her wonder if anyone else had ever truly seen it. You're still unsure, aren't you? Ethan asked, breaking the silence between them as they entered a private chamber. Lily nodded, her eyes lowering for a moment as she processed everything. I've never been in a place like this. I've never felt like I belonged. She hesitated, unsure of how to express the mix of emotions swirling inside her. Ethan stepped closer, his presence reassuring. You belong with me, Lily, he said firmly. This is not just about power or titles. It's about us, and what we can create together. Lily's heart swelled with emotion. She had spent her entire life hiding, trying to be something she wasn't just to fit in, but here, with Ethan, it was different. She didn't have to pretend. He saw her. And for the first time in her life, she was ready to see herself, too. I want to believe that, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan reached out and gently lifted her chin, his touch soft but insistent. You don't have to do anything alone anymore. I'm here. His words wrapped around her like a promise, one she wasn't sure she was ready to accept but knew, deep down, that she wanted to. The days ahead would not be easy, nothing about their journey together would be. But in this moment, standing by his side, Lily felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. She wasn't invisible. She was exactly where she was meant to be, beside Ethan. And with him, maybe, just maybe, she could finally find her place in a world that had once seemed so cold and unforgiving. Together, they would face whatever came their way, and she would no longer have to hide. I can feel the weight of the future pressing down on me, Lily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper as she stood next to Ethan in the quiet of the palace garden. The sun had just set, casting the sky in hues of deep orange and purple, and for a brief moment, the world felt peaceful. Yet, there was a restlessness inside her, something she couldn't quite shake. Ethan stood beside her, his presence as steady as ever, but even he seemed lost in thought. The silence between them was comfortable, but Lily could sense the unspoken tension in the air. The future was uncertain, and though she had found a new place by his side, doubts lingered in her mind. What if I'm not enough, she asked, almost to herself. What if I can't live up to what everyone expects of me? Ethan turned his head to look at her, his silver-gray eyes intense yet gentle. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are, Lily, he said, his voice firm and reassuring. I chose you not for what you can give me or what you think you should be, but for who you are, right now. His words resonated deep within her. She had never been one to believe in fate, never thought she could belong to someone as powerful as him. But here she was, standing by his side, not just as his companion but as his equal. It was a role she wasn't sure she was ready for, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she didn't have to prove herself to anyone except herself. But what about them? Lily asked, her gaze sweeping over the horizon where the last traces of sunlight disappeared behind the palace walls. What about the people who will never see me as anything more than a weak Omega? Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand in his. They don't matter, he said simply, because you are not here to prove anything to anyone. You are here because I want you here, and that's all that matters. His words were a balm to the wounds she had carried for so long. For the first time in her life, she felt like her worth wasn't tied to her rank or her past. It was enough to simply be herself. She looked up at him, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite describe. It was gratitude, yes, but it was more than that. It was a deep sense of belonging, something she had never known. I don't know what the future holds, she said quietly, but I know I don't want to face it alone. Ethan's expression softened, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift from his shoulders. You won't have to, he replied, his voice low but filled with certainty. You'll never have to face anything alone again. They stood there in silence for a moment, the only sound the rustling of the leaves in the evening breeze. It was as if time had stopped, just for them. In this moment, there was no crown, no title, no expectations. There was only the two of them, and the connection that had formed between them. Thank you, Lily whispered, her voice full of emotion. Thank you for seeing me. Ethan's hand tightened around hers, his thumb brushing gently over her skin. Thank you for letting me see you, he said softly. They stood together, hand in hand, as the last traces of sunlight faded from the sky. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Lily felt ready to face it, knowing she would have Ethan by her side. Together, they would navigate whatever came their way. And that thought, that simple truth, was all she needed to feel at peace. I was wrong about everything, Lily whispered as she stood before the grand doors of the palace. The evening air was cool, and the shadows of the palace seemed to stretch across the courtyard, wrapping the world in a quiet stillness. Ethan stood next to her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a silent comfort that she had come to rely on. They had been through so much together, yet there was still so much more ahead of them. Her mind, once filled with doubt and fear, now felt clear, like the night sky above them. You weren't wrong, Ethan replied softly, his voice low and full of understanding. You've just had to fight for things that others take for granted. But you've always known what matters. You've just needed someone to remind you. She turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. He was right. She had always fought, always struggled, but now, with him by her side, it felt like things could be different. It felt like there was a future for her, for both of them. She had never imagined that the Alpha King could be so human. Ethan, with his quiet strength, had shown her that even the most powerful of men had their vulnerabilities, their fears. And he had trusted her with that. It was something she had never expected from someone in his position, but it was everything she had needed. I never thought I could have this, Lily admitted, her voice trembling slightly as she looked into his eyes. A chance to be something more, to be seen for who I really am. Ethan's eyes softened, his hand moving from her shoulder to gently cup her face. You've always been more than you realized, Lily, he said, his voice rich with sincerity. I've seen it from the start. And I will always see it. She felt the warmth of his words sink into her, calming the storm of emotions that had raged within her for so long. She wasn't just an Omega. She wasn't just someone who had been cast aside. She was strong, capable, and worthy of love. And in that moment, she realized that love wasn't just something that came from others. It was something that began within herself. What do we do now? She asked, a question that had lingered in her heart since the moment she had stepped into this new world. Ethan smiled, the weight of his crown seemingly lighter in the quiet of the night. We face it together, he said simply. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. It was a promise, one that Lily knew would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The path they walked was uncertain, the future unclear, but with Ethan by her side, she felt ready for anything. Together, she whispered, the word tasting like freedom. She had no idea what the future would hold, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to face it. Together, they would navigate the trials of power, love, and everything in between. And no matter what the world threw their way, Lily knew one thing for sure, she was no longer just the girl in the shadows. She was a part of something bigger. Something real. I never imagined it would feel like this, Lily whispered, her voice filled with awe as she gazed out over the vast expanse of the royal gardens. The sun had just risen, casting golden light over the flowers and trees that seemed to glow with life. The palace behind them stood tall and imposing, but in the quiet of the morning, it felt like a world unto itself, a world where Lily could finally be at peace. Ethan stood beside her, his presence a steady comfort as always. His hand brushed against hers, and she turned to face him, meeting his gaze with a warmth that she hadn't known she could feel. "What do you imagine it feels like?" he asked, his voice low and curious. Lily took a deep breath, letting the moment settle in her heart. "It feels like freedom," she said slowly. "Like I'm not defined by where I come from, or what others think of me. Like I can finally breathe and just be." Ethan smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. "You've always had that within you, Lily," he said quietly. "You've just needed to see it." "I've always seen it." The words hit her deeper than she expected. The truth of what he said settled in her chest, and for the first time, Lily believed it. She had spent so long hiding, trying to live up to the expectations of others, trying to prove that she was worthy of something more. But now, standing beside Ethan, she realized that she had been worthy all along. "I never thought I could belong anywhere," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I never thought anyone could see me for who I really am." Ethan stepped closer, his hand gently brushing her cheek. "You belong here," he said softly. "You belong with me." His words were like a balm to the wounds she hadn't even realized were still there. The past didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the future they would build together, the life they would create side by side. "Thank you," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for showing me that I can be something more." Ethan took her hand in his grip warm and strong. "You were always more, Lily," he said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "And together, we'll show the world just what that means." They stood there for a long moment, hand in hand, the world around them bathed in the soft light of the rising sun. Lily didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face it. With Ethan by her side, she knew she could face anything. Together, they would navigate the challenges, the triumphs, and everything in between. And with each step they took, she would finally be free to be herself, without fear, without doubt, just as she was meant to be.